Hello, everyone. This is our literary criticism theory presentation by the Anti-Establishment Group, presented by Molly, Adriana, Michaela, Corey, Damien, and Jordan. The literary theories and stories we'll be talking about today are The Mask of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe, which is a Marxist theory, and we'll also be talking about The Kulala the Leopard by Jack London, which is a pro-colonialism theory.
The Marxist criticism is a criticism based on the writings of philosopher and economist Karl Marx, which mentions that there's two different social classes, the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. The proletariat is a working class and the bourgeoisie is the wealthier class. It mentions that the economy, which analyzes the economic structures such as limiting a character's action and powers based on their economic status.
In our research of the history and background of Marxist theory, it began with the works of Karl Marx at the end of the 19th century. Karl Marx's theories were initially popularized in the Manifesto of the Communist Party, in which he co-authored with Engels and published in 1848. Karl Marx's manifesto had a resurgence within the October revolutions during the final months of World War I. After the revolutions have ended, Marxist theory would become the official literary theory for the Soviet Union.
The Mask of the Red Death is about a plague that rapidly kills men. Prince Prospero, which is the main character, however, makes a masked ball in an imperial suite which has 7 different colored rooms. Without worrying, when a strange guest appears, the prince demands the guest to reveal himself. Once the guest removes his mask, he shows that the death has come to the prince's home, leading to the death of everyone in the palace. The Mask of the Red Death is an allegory because the hidden meaning is death, and there are certain things that represent something, and they're used as symbols.
Our analysis from reading The Mask of the Red Death, it is an allegory showing how wealthy or how safe people are. We cannot escape death. The colorful rooms represent the different stages of life, from purple to representing youth, to adulthood that represents the color orange, to eventually death that represents the color black. The clock that is mentioned in the story is an hourly reminder that death awaits or comes for us all.
This is the works cited page for the Marxist literary theory. The next story we will be covering is Kulala the Leopard, written by Jack London. This story will be read through the Postcolonialism literary theory.
Postcolonialism studies the processes of colonization and decolonization and how they affect the people experiencing them. They may take into account the actual language the author uses, how they represent the colonized and colonizing peoples and cultures, and how the work defies or defends colonialism. This criticism especially focuses on writings of authors from a colonized land, currently or formerly, and any literature from or about a colonized culture, whether the author is from that culture or not.
Postcolonialism is the study of political, cultural, and economic structure and imperialism, which focuses on the exploitation of colonized people along with their lands. Postcolonialism is built around the concept of resistance, and this theory was developed by the Columbia University professor Edward Said in 1978.
Postcolonialism began in the 1980s, as many of the world powers started to lose colonial ownership of several lands, and the gained freedom of many of those once colonized places began to dispel the rumors of what had been made up about them by these colonizing nations, such as the United States and the United Kingdom, to gain their independence back onto what their people were. A large portion of this history comes from the fact that many of the indigenous people, whether they were Native Americans, Native Hawaiians, or even Indians, were created by those colonizing powers. And so with the history in the creation of postcolonialism in around the 1980s by academics, this was a way to dispel any idea that these people were savage brutes outside of the world and could not create their own functioning governments and while staying true to their original roots, spirituality, and many other practices that had been either made illegal or completely eradicated by colonial powers. One of the ways that we can look at postcolonialism is the deconstructive questioning of a quote-unquote European Enlightenment, as many of these Anglo-Saxon nations did their best to eradicate forms of life and spirituality in these uncivilized areas of the world. That is what gave rise to postcolonialism in the late 20th century, as we look to see how we can regain some of the culture that was once lost through the power of colonization.
To summarize Kulau the leper, Kulau is the leader of a group of lepers living on the island of Kauai, holding out against capture and quarantine by American colonizers. They see no reason to basically be imprisoned on an island that is not their homeland over a disease that was brought by the colonizing people. The colonizers have been slowly driving them up a steep mountain range, and when a bounty is placed on Kulau by the soldiers, they attack with rifles and artillery shells. Kulau fights fiercely to protect his people, but becomes the last man standing as some die and others surrender. As the surrendering people pass by him to join the soldiers, they jeer and curse at him. Even then, he continues the fight, unwilling to be removed from his home. The soldiers eventually give up, and Kulau lives the rest of his life on Kauai as a free man.
Kulau the leper is an act of cultural dominance. Jack London took the true story of Kulau, who was a 31-year-old Hawaiian that contracted leprosy along with his son. Kulau resisted being sent to an isolated colony for the afflicted, but then the segregation of his people with leprosy began under the Hawaiian monarch. Kulau was a political and cultural hero to the native Hawaiians, and Jack London altered that. He altered it in such a way as to present a traditional American hero who was independent and rebellious of authority figures. Essentially, a lone hero fighting for his freedom. Jack London takes that Hawaiian story and transforms it to fit the American sensibilities. London's story becomes an instance of imperialism, a domination of America's cultural dominance. He does this by not mentioning Kuau's ancestry, by eliminating Kuau's wife and son from the story. London saw in the story the struggle for survival amongst individuals and races, with the fittest individual or race surviving and the unfit doomed to extinction. This was essentially a removal of the indigenous people. London said that he has heard the story of Kuau while he was sailing to Hawaii on the Snark. One of his crewmates that came along with him, his name was Bert Stolz. That was the son of the sheriff whom Kuau had killed. Some of the differences between London's story and Palani's story, which is Kuau's wife, was to make the story more dramatic. Palani's story essentially deemed him as a hero or a family central guy, and London's story is different because London's desire was to make the story more dramatic. An example of this would be Kuau's relationship with his gun that is emphasized in London's story and demonstrates American enrichment on a Hawaiian story. Kowal's mazer, or Kowal's gun, is the one thing in his life that never failed him, and he dies with his gun pressed against his chest. He holds his gun as if it was something precious, something close to his heart. I think that the gun was a symbol of rebellion and his fight for freedom, and his gun was the reason that Kowal could die a free man. While Polani's story, which again is Kowal's wife, says that he instructs her to bury the gun with him, stating, "I alone used it when I go. We go together when my work is done. Its work in the world is done." Polani saw the moment as an act of love. By taking the gun with him, Kowal was accepting total blame for the trouble that he caused. He had the desire to protect his family even at death. Jack London also adds more episodes of violent confrontation and death than actually occurred. The story of Kowal by London is not that his story was fictional and therefore false, or that Polani is autobiographical and is therefore true, but they simply just had different motives for telling Kowal's story.
This is the works cited page for the Postcolonialism literary theory.